What is going on, everybody? Week 2 NFL DFS with one of the best people on planet Earth, JoelWirth. Joel, how are you doing today?
Good, man. Together again for the first time. Thank you for holding it down week one while I was out of town with family, but yeah, looking forward to it.
I tried my best here. Week 1 wasn't too bad. Hoping for a better week 2. We got 10 games in the early window. We have 3 in the afternoon portion of the program. And then if you're playing on FanDuel for the second week in the row, they are playing the night game. So you'll be getting the Texans in Chicago. We'll get through all that. We got some chalk plays we got to go through today. Jordan Mason, obviously. We've got Zach Charbonnet with Kenneth Walker. We'll get through that stuff too. But for me, I think it's kind of leaning an alpha wide receiver week. But we'll get into that here in a little bit. Before we get started, if you are playing over on FanDuel, use idpplus.com/FanDuel. Get $50 in bonus bets when you deposit $10. So deposit the $10, get $50 in bonus bets. Bet a couple anytime touchdowns, make your money back, and get the gambling rolling. So idpplus.com/FanDuel. So we'll get right into it, Joel. We're going to kick it off with probably one of my favorite games on the slate with the Buccaneers and the Lions.
Yeah, highest over-under on the slate, 51.5. That's up from 51 on the opener, so I think the public likes that, and the sharps like that one as well. Detroit is a 7.5-point favorite over the Buccaneers at home. Back-to-back home games for Detroit to start the season. I like a ton of guys in this game. What are you thinking?
I like a lot of them too. And I wish I would have taken my own advice last week when I told everybody to play Baker Mayfield with Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. You would have won a lot of money. I told you that. I didn't do it, but I'm going to go back to the well here with that. I think Mike Evans is criminally underrated, and I think he's going to go under-owned like he normally does. And then I'm also on the other side going to play some Jared Goff stacks. Trying to get a little bit different. I think especially on FanDuel, I think Jahmyr Gibbs is going to have a little bit of ownership, which is kind of weird because we just got off David Montgomery week. But I'm just trying to figure out how people are going to play this because we just saw the Jameson Williams blow-up game. I believe he is 5,700 over on FanDuel. So, I mean, he's pretty cheap and pretty easy to get into lineups. Yeah, 5,700 over on FanDuel. And then Amon-Ra St. Brown is one of the higher price wide receivers, but he's got a really nice floor coming off a bounce back game. I'm curious to see how people play it. And then, we've got the running backs for the Buccaneers as well and Rachaad White. So pretty interesting. I think there's a lot of different ways you can go about it. I mean, I think both sides are, as far as quarterbacks, you can play Baker. His, target tree is much more condensed. It's, Chris Godwin, it's Mike Evans. That's how he's going to get there. And then with Jared Goff, it's a little more different. I'm not sure if a lot of people are going to pay up to play Sam Laporta. I think I'm going to. I think I'm going to try to fit Amon-Ra St. Brown and Laporta with Jared Goff and try to find some relief elsewhere. But over on FanDuel, Sam Laporta highest price tight end at 7,900, and then over on DraftKings, it's probably going to end up the same way. So he's 6,300. So a lot of different ways that you can go about it. Is there a favorite click in this game for you?
I think it's easier to say the one guy I don't like is David Montgomery, just because a couple things. Like Tampa's good against the run, and they're pretty bad against the pass, and they're beat up in the secondary, right? They lost their two top backup corners. Yeah. They don't have Antoine Winfield. That's a huge blow for them. So I like basically everything in the Detroit passing game. Like I didn't want to like Jameson Williams, but because he's hurt, but he's so cheap that I think you have to get some exposure there. I do like Jahmyr Gibbs just because like I said, I don't think you want to run up the gut against this team. So I think he's going to get the bulk of the touches from the running backs. Amon-Ra St. Brown I like a lot, but man, that price point is kind of, that's tough to pull off. So I think he's more of a tournament play because I don't know that you can afford him in cash, even though I think his floor is really high, but that price point is just a little sketchy for me. And then the quarterbacks, like I love Goff in cash, and I like you said, I like Baker in tournaments as well.
Yeah, I definitely agree there. I'm going to show up to the dance with a Jared Goff stack. I think that's one of my favorite tournament plays because I think he's going to go under-owned, and we know his ceiling. And I talked about it last week. It's already happens on DraftKings, but over on FanDuel, you get the 300-yard bonus. I think it sets up really well Jared Goff going up against this banged up secondary that he can get there, especially with some of the other quarterbacks on the slate like Lamar Jackson and Anthony Richardson. Their game script, it doesn't really call for them to, really push the ball too much. So kind of leaning into the cheaper quarterbacks and then kind of paying up for these stud wide receivers like I talked about earlier. But that's one of the games I'm trying to get a lot of exposure to. I think if I'm playing cash over on FanDuel this week, I think my click would be Chris Godwin just for one of the cheaper wide receivers, but there's a lot of different ways you can go about it. Another game that I am really into, I think it's going to go a little under the radar outside the chalk play as 49ers at the Vikings. I do want to ask before we get into, the game totals and stuff, how are you handling Mason today?
I think I want to fade him just because I think this Viking secondary is much more exploitable than their run defense is. And I think so. I'm really in on the 49ers passing game. So I kind of want to fade Mason. But again, that price point is it's the same thing as Jameson Williams. Like that price point is just too enticing. And he's going to be really heavily owned in cash games. So I don't want to totally fade him either.
Yeah. So I'm going to play him definitely in cash. I think if you don't show up in your cash lineup without Mason, you're probably set up to fail. And we'll get into the other one with Cooper Kupp. But I think I'm going to play him a little bit in tournaments. I'm going to play a lot of Big Cock Brock Purdy this week. I really think it sets up well. Just overall, Brian Flores is going to bring the exotic blitzes, but, he's going to play a lot of zone behind it. So I think that's the way to exploit that. I think I'm going to be a little overweight on George Kittle just because I know he's got the floor games, but those ceiling games, I mean, he could outrun the rest of the tight end room on the slate. And especially since we saw last week, tight end just totally flopped. We are worried about McBride. We're worried about Mark Andrews. If Kittle has the blow-up game and nobody else shows up, I mean, that's so much leverage against the rest of the field. And then the other thing I do want to point out, Brandon Ayuk had a bad game on Monday Night Football, and I think a lot of people are afraid to click him. I'm going to probably more than Debo, even though I think Debo is in a better matchup. But I just trying to get some leverage off the field. I think people are going to write him off after week one, and then just kind of the way I'm going to go about it. But before we go to the next game, what's the team total on this one?
It's over under is 46.5. San Fran is a 4.5 point favorite. That's down from a 6 point favorite. So the money's coming in on the Vikings. Implied totals are 25.5 for San Francisco and 21 for Minnesota. I think when you talk about Purdy, and we talked about kind of this when we talked to Goff and Baker Mayfield, you got to remember who's not on the slate today. It's like Josh Allen's not on the slate. Tua's not on the slate. Hurts isn't on the slate. Stroud's not on the slate. The quarterbacks are kind of picked over. So you've got like the elite quarterbacks are really just Lamar and Mahomes. So if you don't want to go to those guys, and we'll talk about them later, I don't think these are ceiling games for either one of those guys. You're going to have to find, these mid-tier quarterbacks and some of these guys like Purdy, I like a lot. Goff, I like a lot. So these are the guys that I'm going to be leaning on heavily today.
Yeah, me as well. Brock Purdy, 7,300 over on FanDuel. And then I do want to talk about Sam Darnold. If you are playing, it's probably large field tournaments, I think Sam Darnold's interesting. No Jordan Addison, so you know that this is going to go through Justin Jefferson. Like I said, I'm really leaning into the high-end wide receivers today. I know it's pricey, but I think that's leverage. We got some guys who are really set up for like the 30-point game that kind of leaves the rest of the field in the dust. So if you wanted to play Sam Darnold and, pair him with Justin Jefferson and then have the bring back with the 49ers, I think that's, the way to go about it as well, especially I don't think you have to do it in small field, but if you're playing large field stuff, I think that's definitely viable. As far as the Vikings running backs go, do you have any interest in Aaron Jones or Ty Chandler?
Not Chandler. Pretty disappointed with his usage in week one. But I do have some interest in Aaron Jones just because I think he's going to get a lot of usage in the passing game.
I definitely agree there. Aaron Jones has always been a hard click for me. I think he's one of those like in my blind spot as far as a player goes where I don't really lean a certain way. And you just kind of, I probably need to think that through a little bit more, especially if the Vikings are down. If you think Sam Darnold does like some of the dump off stuff, Aaron Jones would probably benefit from that. Just because, like you said, drafted a lot of Ty Chandler. I thought he was going to be a little bit more involved, and maybe it's just because they played the Giants last week and everything went sideways. But other than that, like I said, I really like the 49ers here. And I'm going to play the pass catchers. That's probably one of my biggest stands as far as the week goes. So we got Gary in here asking Joe Burrow or Daniel Jones, the second option for Superflex. I mean, I think this is Joe Burrow pretty easy, but I'll ask you.
I think you can make a case for Daniel Jones just because of they're playing the Washington secondary and they've been terrible. Like Tampa Bay just absolutely lit them up last week. 4 touchdowns from their wide receivers. So yeah. I think you can make that case. But yeah, I like if Burrow goes off and I started Daniel Jones and he does Daniel Jones things, I couldn't forgive myself. So
yeah, that's just one of those.
Joe Burrow.
That's just one of those things. Looking to be able to look at mirror at yourself the next day.
Exactly.
Like, what are we doing here? But I like Joe. Yeah. I like Joe Burrow a lot today. We'll get to him in a minute. It's week 1. Bengals always start off slow. I'm not ready to write him off. So we'll go to the next game here. Seahawks at the Patriots. What do you got for us?
One of the lower scoring games on the slate, only a 38.5 over under. Seattle by 3 on the road, going west to east, playing a 1:00 game, 3 time zones over. So tough trip for them. And New England coming off a surprising week 1 win. So implied totals of 20.75 for Seattle and 17.75 for New England.
So this, I'm not expecting much from this game. I played a lot of Geno last week, and I was honestly really disappointed on how it ended up. I know it came off weird. The offensive line is already really banged up. So I wish I could lean into the passing game. As far as I think, Christian Gonzalez put the clamps on Jamar Chase last week. I think DK Metcalf can be in store for that as well. And I'm kind of interested, honestly, Patriots defense going up against the Seahawks offensive line that just seems very banged up. I mean, they were playing their third right tackle last week, and that was one of the worries going into the season. We saw it kind of play out week 1. I'm interested in that, but as far as the playmakers go, I don't really have a lean. I know Kenneth Walker is out, and they have Zach Charbonnet, but Zach Charbonnet is 53 or 6,300 on FanDuel. I mean, that's like a mid-price running back for somebody who's a backup. I just don't want to pay that price. And then over on DraftKings, he's 5,800. So for a kind of a punt running back play, I'd just rather play Jordan Mason. Yeah. I think he's going to have a good workload. He might be able to get a little bit of leverage, but he's not the punt running back that I usually like, especially for that price point. And I just, other than that, I don't really have much on this game unless you do. I mean, I guess Ramondre Stevenson's an okay click after last week, but I just, I'm going to play Patriots defense and call today.
Yeah, I like the Charbonnet things. Like Charbonnet's just not good, so I don't trust him in this game script where he's going up against a good defense and, like I said, the tough travel. So yeah, I don't like the Seattle offense at all this week. Jackson Smith-Njigba just hasn't shown anything. Again, didn't do anything last week. Got outscored by Tyler Lockett. So yeah, really nothing on the Seattle side. Without Ken Walker, there's really nothing on that side that I'm interested in. So I don't disagree. I think the New England defense is probably the only realistic play that you want to make in this game. I could see Ramondre, but Seattle's run defense was pretty good. They shut down Javonte Williams in week 1. So yeah, there's not much in this game I really wanted. I'm itching to start.
Yeah, especially the McDonald defense I thought showed up, put Bo Nix in the blender last week. So you get Jacoby Brissett. They just don't have the weapons to push it. Like I said, if you're playing tournaments, I guess Ramondre is okay if you want to correlate him with the Patriots D. But as far as that, I just don't have much else. So one more question from Gary. CJ Stroud or Deshaun Watson this week? I'm going to go Stroud here, but see what you have to say about it.
Yeah, I think that's kind of the same thing as the Daniel Jones things. I do like Cleveland's passing game a little bit just because of the matchup. And we'll get to this because Jacksonville's got some injuries and their secondary. So I do like Amari Cooper, but I'm not sure I like Watson. So yeah, I think Stroud's just the safer play.
Yeah, which I mean, if Watson just almost looked competent, I would almost run the idea by it just because his running ability, and we saw him on the run last week. I mean, going up against the Cowboys defensive line probably wasn't an ideal start, and I I know we don't like Deshaun Watson, shouldn't be vouching for him, but as far as fantasy goes, you want that run aspect. But I just after seeing CJ Stroud last week, I'm just going to lean that way. So next game, Giants at the Commanders. This is kind of a goofy one. What do you got for us on that?
43.5 total. Washington by 1.5 at home. So implied totals of the Commanders 22.5, Giants 21. This game's gone up a bit from 43 to 43.5, but the line has stayed the same.
So this really don't have much on this game. Jaden Daniels is going to have some ownership after what happened last week. I do not have much interest in playing him at all. I'm not sure if that's wrong. If I did, I'm not going to have any wide receivers with him just because we saw last week he didn't bring anybody to the table with him. I mean, Terry McLaurin was a dud. Luke McCaffrey didn't have much. And then, the most production was Austin Eckler and Brian Robinson Jr. So like I said, I think Daniel's going to have some ownership just because of his price. I'm not going to go there this week. And then on the other side, I think you can make a case for Malik Neighbors, especially at his price point. I think he's a mid-tier. Let me check real quick over on FanDuel, 6,400. I mean, if he goes off, he'll end up a 7K wide receiver, and this would be the matchup for him. And then let me check over on DraftKings real quick. 5,900. I mean,
that's a really nice price point.
It is. And, the hope if you are playing Daniel Jones this week, obviously going up against the Commanders defense, that's one of the worst in football. You can put them and the Cardinals in that same tier, but it sets up nicely. And honestly, usually we talk about the quarterback bringing the wide receivers with them. I think if Daniel Jones gets there, I mean, Malik Neighbors got to have the alpha game, and he brings Daniel Jones along for the ride. And I know last week Daniel Jones had a lot of stuff in the red zone as far as like his rushing ability. So if you think he can run one in, that kind of pays off. He's a cheap guy, and you can play a lot elsewhere. Like I said, the couple running backs we'll get into that are higher priced that are in nice matchups. The wide receivers, obviously. But other than that, the only thing, I mean, you could probably play either defense. I probably would rather play the Giants defense just because that defensive line can go after Jaden Daniels taking a bunch of sacks. I mean, other than that, I don't think I have much else on this game. What about you?
I do think Daniel Jones is a viable tournament play just because of how bad this Commanders pass defense is. And Dan Quinn came in as the head coach, but things have not gotten better. They were one of the worst pass defenses in the league last year. They got just destroyed by Tampa last week. So yeah, I love Neighbors at his price point, like him a lot. And Wan'Dale Robinson got 12 targets last week. I don't think that's going to repeat just because I don't think they're going to be able to shut down Malik Neighbors. So I think he will go back to being the most targeted receiver in the passing game. But I think he's still viable at his price just because he is fairly cheap for that target volume. And then I agree with you 100%. If I'm starting or if I'm paying for Jaden Daniels, I'm starting him naked. There's really no one I want to pay for. Like Terry McLaurin just all he did was line up on the left side and just go run wind sprints. So I don't know what this Cliff Kingsbury offense is supposed to look like. Hopefully we'll get some clarity after week 2, but not promising after week 1.
I think it's going to look terrible. I'll just give you the crystal ball prediction. I mean, we saw Cliff Kingsbury we saw him 2 years ago. He shows up with the same stuff. I mean, Terry McLaurin's going to line up on the left side, on the outside, and he's not going to move. And they're just going to do like the horizontal raid instead of the air raid from the Big 12 days. So I can't do it. Like I said, like Neighbors and Daniel Jones is kind of a fun tournament play. As long as he has a decent floor, I don't think you're going to get 300 yards and 3 touchdowns out of Daniel Jones. But if he just has a solid floor and Neighbors gets there, it allows you to pay up for all the rest of the guys and kind of work that way. So next game, another kind of goofy one. Chargers at the Panthers. I'll let you have it, but I just
Yeah, 39 total. So again, one of the lowest totals on the slate. Chargers 5-point favorites on the road. Again, going west to east for a 1 o'clock or Eastern game. 22 implied total for the Chargers, 17 for Carolina.
I really want to try to give Carolina. I know they got blown out last week. I know everybody's got like the tombstone ready, but I remember a couple years ago, and I know this is a totally different thing. Green Bay got just waxed by New Orleans week 1, and they were able to turn it around. And I'm not saying that Bryce Young is Aaron Rodgers, but maybe that's just like a one-off, and they can be a little more competitive. I know they probably don't have the horses to do it, but Chargers defense, obviously, I think is going to have some ownership, and rightfully so. I just don't think Bryce Young can get there. And I thought last week against the Saints, even if they were down, like Deontay Johnson could end up, what Wan'Dale Robinson got with the million targets, Xavier Leggett, a guy I really like this offseason. But none of them even got close to getting there. I mean, it just was terrible all around. The other thing I do want to bring up, J.K. Dobbins, I think will have some ownership after what happened last week. I was listening to the All Out Blitz with J.J. Winter and Doug Orth, and Doug talked about, a lot of J.K. Dobbins' production came off 2 broken plays by the Raiders' run defense, but people think that J.K. Dobbins is all the way back. I'm sure he's a fine play. If I played him, I'd probably correlate him with the Chargers defense. But I mean, other than that, I can't do anything else. I don't think Justin Herbert's got to push the ball. I don't think he's a great play at all, and I don't know which wide receivers I'd even pair him with. I think Josh Palmer's going to play, but other than that, I mean, Ladd McConkey, I guess he's okay. I don't see this game getting there outside of maybe playing defense.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that game last week just kind of got out of hand for Carolina, and they just never kind of bounced back. So I'm not burying them quite yet. And I don't like J.K. Dobbins this week. I mean, he just didn't have the touch volume that I want. So I don't think he's a good tournament play because I don't think he has the upside, and I don't think he's a great cash game play because I don't think he has the touch floors. And I think he only had 10, 11 touches last week. So yeah, his fantasy points over expectation was super high, but yeah, 6,800. That's just way too much for a guy who only got 10, 11, barely got double-digit touches. So, yeah, I'm staying away from him as well. There's really nothing in this game I'm really interested in.
No, like I said, I think J.K. Dobbins will get a couple clicks, but it's just not a place I want to go to this week. I'll play Chargers defense in some lineups and just kind of move along. So
he's a guy I'm much more excited to fade than
yes. So. Next game here, one of the probably most under-owned games and a game I'm really excited to attack this week is the Saints at the Cowboys.
I agree with you 100%. 46.5 point total. Dallas 6-point favorites, so implied totals of 26.25 for Dallas and 20.25 for the Saints. I love this game.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I think CeeDee Lamb. We'll get to flag plants, and I'll just do the spoiler alert. He will be one of my flag plants this week. I think he just sets up in an awesome matchup. Marshawn Lattimore's out. We saw last week, just like we were talking about, the Saints bulldozed Carolina, and I think it gives them people the impression that they're better than what they are. I thought the Saints going into the season would probably be one of the worst teams in the league. And I mean, last week they looked like a juggernaut, but I think this is a fun spot to attack, especially for Dak Prescott. One of these quarterbacks where you know where the production's going just because the target tree is so limited. And, on the other side, Rashid Shaheed's really cheap. Chris Olave, after last week, people probably don't want to click him either just because of the production that he didn't get in a blowout win. I mean, if you saw that, the score and you're like, oh, Chris Olave had a big game, and you look, and I think he had 2 targets for, a couple yards. But one of my favorite games on the slate, like I said, I'm going to be very overweight on CeeDee Lamb. And then with Jake Ferguson, I believe he is doubtful. So Luke Schumacher will be in as well. I think he's an interesting punt play, especially over on DraftKings. Let me look real quick at his price. But, what's your favorite part of this game that you're attacking?
I love Chris Olave this week in the bounce back spot. I just think that the New Orleans Carolina game got so it just got so out of control that they just didn't need Olave, so that just didn't target him, didn't use him. So yeah, and I don't think this is a spot where they're going to get ahead on Rashid Shaheed bombs and stuff like that. So I love Olave in the spot. I think CeeDee Lamb is he's expensive, but I think he's my favorite. He's the guy I've been taking one overall in battle royale drafts. I think he's got the highest upside this week. The Saints are notoriously bad at covering slot receivers, so if they put him in the slot, that's a tough matchup for them. Marshawn Lattimore's probably not going to play. So I love Lamb this week. I like Dak. I think Derek Carr is a very viable tournament quarterback. I've been beating the Derek Carr drum all off season. I like him in this offense with Clint Kubiak. Kind of showed what they can do in week one. And I like Kamara too, because I think they're going to this is going to be a back and forth game. They're going to have to throw the ball. I think Kamara is going to be an underneath target. The one thing I don't like is the Saints tight ends, even though they were really productive in week one. Talisi Fuaga is playing left tackle for them, had a back injury, probably is not going to play. So I think they're probably going to have to keep their tight ends into block. So I'm staying away from those guys this week, even though they had really big week ones.
Yeah, that's a great point. And, a couple things with Alvin Kamara, as good as he was last week in a positive game script, he is even better in a negative one, just because he'll get the dump offs. I think he's a great bring back if you're playing the Dak stack. And then I just got rid of it, Schumacher. He will be a great punt play over on DraftKings. He's like, no, not Schuster, Schumacher, 2,900. So if you're going into that realm, and then over on FanDuel, he ends up in I believe it's like the Colby Parkinson range, like 4,800. So just these punt tight ends who walk into a really nice spot.
Yeah, I don't like that price on FanDuel, but the DK price, the 2,900, if you've got a loaded lineup and you just need a basically zero base salary to sneak in there, I like that a lot.
Yeah, so the only other thing I've got, and this kind of contradicts what you said. I agree with you on the Clint Kubiak offense, just because of how bad it was for the Saints last year, where they just couldn't move the ball at all. I do think that I'm a little worried about the Saints offensive line, and especially with Derek Carr if he gets pressure on him. I think we saw last year, Mike Zimmer sends all the pressure and does like some really unique stuff. I think that he could get to Derek Carr. And I think for a tournament defense, if you want to play Cowboys and hope that, you might get the pick six or whatever, I think it's viable. And that's like, I would say probably large field, just because I don't think anybody's going to play them. I could be wrong, but they're mid-price defense. So, projected for, basically 0%. So nobody's going to play Cowboys defense this week.
Yeah, it's a good price for a defense with Micah Parsons. I'll say that.
Yeah, it definitely is. So I got a question here. Will Kenneth Walker play? I don't believe so. So
yeah, he's listed as doubtful. There's only been one, since they changed the rules on how they list players, there's only been one doubtful player to ever play. So it's highly unlikely.
Yeah. So like I said, this game is going to go under-owned. It's one of the spots I'm going to attack this week. CeeDee Lamb, like I said, going to be planting the flag on him. And I know you brought up the Battle Royale stuff. So real quick before we get the next game, plug that, please, because that's some of the best stuff for people who wants to play underdog.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I do a Battle Royale show every week. Just came out yesterday, plugging Battle Royale for week 2. Basically, it's DFS, except you're drafting the players instead of a salary cap. You can do either 6-player drafts or 12-player drafts. So it's a lot of fun. I really enjoy it. And it's just just a different way to play DFS.
Yep. So really good stuff. I'm sure that's not the professional way to do that. We do that at the end of the show, but I want to make sure the people hear it more than one time. So next game here, Colts at the Packers. Talk about your very sad Packers here as we play the fiddle for Malik Willis this week.
All right. 40.5 point game total. Colts are 2.5 point favorites. Now this game, the look ahead line was Green Bay by 4. After the Love injury, it went all the way down to 3.5 by Indianapolis by 3.5. So it's been bet back up to 2.5. So the sharps and the money are on the Packers. I think this line is completely wrong, but I'll let you go before I pontificate on this game.
Gotcha. I've already bet the Colts. I got that line, as it was kind of moving, and it's the Malik Willis thing for me. I think in other weeks, if you were playing on DraftKings, Malik Willis, people would play him in tournaments as a punt quarterback to where you could hope that he rushes a little bit. I mean, hasn't thrown for 100 yards in his 3 starts. So if you're hoping for anything, it'd be on the ground. But I don't think you can do that this week. Just some of the other guys, it's week 2. Pricing's a little more loose. You definitely can't play him on FanDuel, but I do
He's
want
more
to.
expensive than Will Levis on FanDuel, which is hilarious.
Yeah, more expensive than Mayo Boy. That's pretty sad. But I do want to point out the other side. The Colts defense under Gus Bradley is going to play the cover 3 zone. He got out of it a little bit, but I mean, they got absolutely smoked on the ground and through the air by the Texans last week. Their secondary just lost Juju Brents. If there is a spot for a Malik Willis to end up with 200 yards and 2 touchdowns and run on the ground, it would be in this spot. And just the run defense, too. I mean, they got gashed by Joe Mixon. You get Josh Jacobs here, who, I'm sure you expect probably gets 20, 25 carries at the minimum, if that.
Yeah, you brought up the point why I like the Packers a lot this week, and that's that defense is really—they're not good and they're really beat up, right? They're missing Juju Brents, like I said, he's on IR. Julian Blackmon's not going to play this week, who's their strong safety, kind of their best run defender in the secondary. Kwity Paye and DeForest Buckner got 1 practice in between them. Buckner's a game time decision, so we'll see if he plays or not. Kwity Paye got 1 practice in on Friday, so he's their best run defender on the edges. I think Josh Jacobs is going to get 30 touches this week. They are going to force feed him until the Colts show they can stop him. And you go back to that game Friday. He struggled early because the offensive line just wasn't giving him anything. But once they kind of got their act together in the second half, he was just breaking off chunk play runs. So I think we could see that again. I'm not afraid of Malik Willis. I'm really not. I think LaFleur is going to just dial up some really easy touches for him. So I like Tucker Kraft as a cheap punt play tight end because I think what he does, like the drag routes, the pivot routes and stuff like that, I think is going to be that's the kind of easy button stuff that they're going to want to give Malik Willis. And I love Jaden Reed this week. It sounds like he came up with a questionable tag on Friday. He may have tweaked his calf or something like that, but sounds like he's going to play. Again, you want to get these easy manufactured touches for Malik Willis, the easy button stuff, and that's what Jaden Reed excels at. And like you brought it up earlier, they are the zone heaviest team in the league. They played 90% zone last year, and they were really heavy zone cover 3 week 1. Jaden Reed was the number 1 PFF graded receiver against zone coverage in week 1. So I love him in this spot. I think the Packers are going to people look at this game without Jordan Love and they say, okay, this is the difference between a 4-point game and a 3.5-point Indy cover. I think this is the reason the Packers don't score 45 points. I think with Jordan Love, they would just absolutely annihilate this defense. And I still think Malik Willis is going to be able to do enough to win this game.
I honestly agree there. And, when he played for Tennessee, I mean, it's not like that offense had, strong weapons, a strong offense outside of, the Derrick Henry stuff.
Terrible offensive lines, too.
Yeah. So you go to Green Bay, who's got all sorts of weapons. I mean, all it takes is 1 deep shot to Christian Watson. I mean, and then talking about Josh Jacobs here, 7,100 over on FanDuel and then over on DraftKings. It's basically more of the same. So give me a second here. I'll pull it up. But, I mean, if Jordan Love was playing, especially on FanDuel, I mean, Josh Jacobs would be like an 8K running back because of that volume. Yep. So I think he's a great tournament play. I think it's a little iffy in cash. I think
it's
there's
risky.
Some other plays, but I definitely agree there. And then the only other thing I really want to talk about is the Colts side of it. I think a lot of people are going to play Colts defense. If you were going to play Colts defense this week, you are praying to God that Malik Willis runs into sacks. I think that's the way that you get there. I'm not a fan of Gus Bradley, and I know that's not what we talk about on the show, but I hate the defense. It drives me nuts. It's not how I would play football in 2024, but you would think this is just an awesome matchup for it, but I'm a little cautious. And then the other 2 guys I want to talk about, Anthony Richardson is a guy who can obviously break the slate. I mean, he just about did it last week on 9 completions, and I know people are worried about that, but if this game gets out of hand, if AR runs it for 2 touchdowns or if he has a bomb and, runs one in, I think even if the game script was good for Indy, I think he can still get there, and you don't have to play any of the wide receivers. I know Alec Pierce had a nice game last week. We'll get news on Josh Downs here in a little bit. Josh Downs was really good last year, and if you, I don't think I can stomach that as far as that goes. But like him and Michael Pittman, I don't think anybody are going to play them if you're into that. And then the only other thing I do want to talk about is Jonathan Taylor. Um, he's the only guy in the Colts backfield. He's 7,700 over on DraftKings and FanDuel. I believe he's 8,200. He ends up, getting a ton of the workload. My problem with him is he doesn't get receiving work, and he's not always on the field for third downs. So I think a lot of people would go to the notion that Jonathan Taylor, they're just going to run the ball, especially if they get in the second half, they get a lead, kind of sit on it and play Jonathan Taylor and Colts defense together. I like that at the beginning of the week, and the more I thought through it, I'm a little scared. So I just think AR is fine in tournaments, and then the Taylor stuff, I'm probably going to be underweight. I'm a little scared that he burns me, but that's just kind of where I'm going to go with that. So
yeah, I agree. On Richardson, if you take away the 3 50-yard plays he had, and obviously that happens, but other than that, he was 6 of 16 for 61 yards or something like that. So I can't stomach that in cash. He's tournament only for me. And Taylor only, like you said, 0 targets in the passing game and only averaged like 3 yards a carry. So wasn't efficient in any way. You got to be hoping for multiple touchdowns if you start him at his price point.
And that's the problem with him compared to like a guy like Alvin Kamara. Say if Alvin Kamara doesn't get 2 touchdowns, he's going to get 5 or 6 targets. And especially on DraftKings, like, the receptions, the full point PPR.
Yep.
That's a big thing. That's always my worry with Jonathan Taylor, especially at that price point. It just it's really hard for me to get there because there's only like one way. I mean, he's got to break 2 long ones or they get in the end zone, he falls in the box twice compared to some of these other running backs. So that's about it. We got a couple more in this early slate. Like I said, NFL really jam-packed the early slate with 10 games. So
Scott Hanson's going to be busy in the red zone.
But next game, Browns at the Jaguars. Another one I think that's going to go a little bit under the radar. So, what do you got for us on this one?
Yeah, pretty low total, 41.5. Jacksonville 3-point favorites at home. Implied totals of 22.25 for the Jags and 19.25 for the Browns.
So this is I don't really have much. I know David Njoku. I know everybody thinks Deshaun Watson sucks, and he does. But, I mean, we've seen the Amari Cooper nuclear game, like strap the rocket to him, gets 40 points. If they get into any, kind of shootout thing, Amari Cooper looks very viable, especially in tournaments. He's going to go be very underowned. He's in that mid wide receiver range. But other than that, on the Brown side, Jerome Ford got a lot of work too. Don't think the Jaguars' defensive line is the equivalent of Micah Parsons and the Cowboys. And as far as the Jaguars side, I can never do Trevor Lawrence just because I don't think he ever gets there. As far as like 300 yards, 3 touchdowns, I can't really do much there. Travis Etienne probably a decent tournament play, and then other than that, Brian Thomas, a decent wide receiver flyer if you're trying to get cheap. But other than that, I think people are going to fire up Jaguars defense, and I'd rather go elsewhere this week. But do you have anything on this game? This is not. I think on paper it looks decent, but just as far myself, I'm not getting here.
Couple guys I like. I do like Amari Cooper in tournaments, like you said, just because Jag secondary is pretty sketchy and they lost Tyson Campbell to IR. So I could see a blow-up game for Cooper here. And I do like Christian Kirk in cash games just because the Browns play a lot of man defense. They're one of the heaviest man defensive teams in the league. And Kirk is much better against man coverage than his zone. So I could see him getting heavily targeted and just having a pretty nice floor volume today. So I like Kirk in cash, especially at his price point.
Yeah, so I'll check out that price point real quick. Evan Ingram, we saw last week, I thought the usage was a little sketchy compared to what it was last week or last year, where he ended up just getting targeted at the wazoo. Christian Kirk, 6K over on FanDuel, that's pretty cheap. He's probably should be more of a, 7K guy, and then 5,500. So
yeah, he's a guy. If you want to get those high end receivers, the Amon-Ra's, the Mike Evans, the CD Lambs, you probably need a guy like that to kind of stick in at the bottom of your lineup. And I like him over Brian Thomas Jr. this week.
Yeah, so Brian Thomas 5,800 over on FanDuel, so that's the same range as Jameson Williams. So if you had to pick in that realm of wide receivers, and then 4,800 over on DraftKings. So, like I said, I guess I could see this game getting a little wonky, but it's just not where I'm wanting to go to this week. So another one that I probably won't have much of, Jets at the Titans. On paper, this is. I feel like I've made that groan about 5 times this morning, but this is just another one. I just we could talk through it, but I don't have much on.
Yeah, I agree. 41 point total. Jets by 4 on the road. Now remember, this is back-to-back road games for the Jets, and coming off a Monday night game on the road in San Francisco. So this is again tough sledding, a tough road trip for them. Implied total is 22.5 for the Jets, 18.5 for Tennessee.
So, Breece Hall is somebody we're going to have to talk through today. If you were playing Jordan Mason, that gives you the opportunity to pay up. Not sure if this is the best spot for Breece Hall, but he is the running back who can obviously get there. Projecting over on FanDuel about 22% ownership at 7,400, right behind Jonathan Taylor as the second highest running back, and then over on FanDuel 8,500. So usually, let's say Breece Hall does what he did back end of last year. These running backs usually end up in the 9K range. So you get a little bit of a discount if you're just thinking through that way. Thought Titans defense was decent, especially up the middle on the defensive line. Gave Caleb Williams all sorts of fits. I mean, he was doing a lot of tap dancing last week and just kind of all over the place. One thing I do want to point out, if you want to correlate Breece Hall with the Jets defense against Carson Wentz Jr., I think that is very viable. I just Will Levis, man. After I saw that interception where he flicked it, just like Carson Wentz did with the Colts against, I believe it was Aaron Donald on the goal line. And looks like he's on the ground praying, like, what in the hell just happened? I know the Jets got ran on last week against the 49ers, but I don't see the Titans doing that. But I think this game ends up kind of a slog. And then only other guy I want to talk about, the Garrett Wilson aspect of it. Going up, I don't think he's getting L'Jarius Sneed totally, but him lurking in the backfield. I like the Titans. I think they're an improved team. I think quarterback's a little goofy, but Garrett Wilson will probably go under-owned if Aaron Rodgers does like the lock button on him like he did Devontae Adams in Green Bay. I can see him getting there. He definitely is more of a tournament play. I don't think you would ever want to stack Aaron Rodgers with him just because I don't think Rodgers can get there. But I thought Aaron Rodgers, for what it was, his age and coming off the injury, looked decent last week. So do you have any, are you playing any of the Jets side?
I talked about on my Battle Royale show this week that there's a clear top 4 in Battle Royale drafts. It's CeeDee Lamb, Cooper Kupp, Breece Hall, and Amon-Ra St. Brown. Breece Hall is the one guy I'm fading just because, like you said, Tennessee run defense is really good. They got Jeffrey Simmons in the middle. They are very much a pass funnel defense. So I don't like Breece Hall at his price point this week. I kind of like Wilson. He's a little bit more expensive than I want to pay. But again, the target volume, like you said, I think he's going to get the Devontae Adams treatment, and I think he's going to get regular, double-digit targets. So I like that target floor. But again, there's so many other like elite receivers that I like better than him this week that he's a tough start for me.
Yeah. FanDuel, he's 8,100. DraftKings, he's 7,100. I wish my thinking is, Tennessee might fight back a little bit, but you're asking for them to kind of get into it. Aaron Rodgers plays notoriously slow. That goes against him.
Yeah.
But like I said, if you want to leverage off some of the Breece Hall ownership, which I think there's going to be a decent amount of, that's a very good way to do it. And I think Aaron Rodgers already came out and said they need to get Garrett Wilson some more looks. So whether they do the layup stuff, any screens, just, some short stuff just to get him going, I can see it. Like I said, he's a decent tournament play. Say if he gets 8-9 receptions, does 100 yards, say if he rips one, or if they get in the red zone and Aaron Rodgers did what he did in Green Bay, where they'd be on the 1 yard line and they would just throw it to Devontae Adams
4 straight times. Yep.
Yeah. We can see Aaron Rodgers getting greedy, and that's the way that Garrett Wilson gets there. But other than that, Calvin Ridley with DeAndre Hopkins playing on a torn MCL. Should have had a bigger game last week. I'm not sure if I can get there. And then Will Levis, I tried to vouch for him. I saw everything I needed to see. I'm going to retire and, delete my tweets on him being a thing. So next game, Raiders at the Ravens. This one's kind of interesting with the big dog and a positive game script. We'll get here in a minute. But what do you got on this one?
All right. Vegas at Baltimore is a 41.5 point game total. Baltimore is now an 8.5 point favorite. They opened at 9, so a little bit of money coming in on the Raiders. 16.5 implied total for the Raiders. That is the lowest on the slate, and 25 for Baltimore.
So there is a couple different ways to go about this. We have seen the Derrick Henry spots, and I feel I've seen some people calling for it this week just because of the positive game script. And I will play a little bit of the big dog just because I'm worried about getting burned that way, because I used to ignore him for years in Tennessee, and then he'd do the 100 yards, 2 touchdowns, and just completely pour dirt all over me. But 2 things I'm worried about. Don't think the offensive line is as good as it's been for Baltimore, and they are going up against Max Crosby and Christian Wilkins, and I just a little worried there. And then the other thing about it too is, I'm not sure if the Raiders can keep up. It's just kind of tough for me there. I don't think anybody's going to play Lamar Jackson. I think this could be a spot where, kind of get some leverage. Everybody plays Derrick Henry. You play Lamar and say Zay Flowers, who got a gazillion targets last week. Maybe play Mark Andrews, who will go under-owned. I think that's probably a large field tournament team. And then you can bring it back with Brock Bowers, who seemed to get elite usage last week as far as the tight ends go. But other than that, I'm going to play a little bit of the big dog. I'll probably pair him with the Ravens defense, even though I don't think it's great. It's just betting against the Raiders, who didn't score any. Antonio Pierce, did the punt thing on the opponent's 40-yard line on 4th and 1, down 7 or whatever, which is absolutely criminal. I think that's a federal offense and you should be arrested, but that's above my pay grade. But other than that, Derrick Henry, Brock Bowers, I think is it for me. Do you have any, kind of leans on this game?
No, I think one of my favorite bets this week is Baltimore under their team total of 25. Just because, like you said, I think they're going to want to slow this game down. But they scored 20 against Kansas City, right? So this is a pretty high projected team total against a really good defense. You brought up Christian Wilkins, Max Crosby, Robert Spillane. They've got a good defense in Vegas. So I think this is a pretty heavy Derrick Henry game script, and I just don't think there's going to be a lot of points in this game by either side. So 25 is way too high for Baltimore's team total. Outside of the tight ends, I really don't like anyone on Baltimore, and frankly, I don't like anyone on the Raiders either. So, I agree with you. Bowers, Likely, and Andrews, I think are all viable plays. I don't want to spend up for Lamar because I just don't think they're going to. This isn't going to be a wide open game. This isn't a heavy Lamar game script. So, I like the tight ends in this game, and that's really about it.
Yep. So, Mark Andrews and Isaiah Likely. Well, I'll ask you this. I'll put you on the spot. If you had to pick one, which one?
Whichever one's cheaper. So
okay, you'll go Likely then.
Yeah, I'll take Likely.
So Mark Andrews, I know he didn't look great, but Chiefs notoriously have put a lot of coverage on him. If you look back to the previous game, so I'm not ready to put him in the dust yet. And then as far as Brock Bowers goes, let me check real quick. 5,300 on FanDuel, and then DraftKings, he ends up 4,400. So
I like those prices.
Yeah, not too bad. So we got fantasy receipts in the house. I'll give you a heads up. You can come after me all you want. I've got about 400 messages that you can bookmark and queue up and drag me with. So always good to get a visit from them.
Yeah, appreciate it.
Nice to see you this morning. Maybe we'll win you some money, but if we get something wrong, just hit me up Monday. Just tag me and we'll get that taken care of there. So, like I said, Ravens defense I think is okay. The perception everybody has is like the Ravens is this top end team. I think they're good. I don't think they're as good as last year. Offensive line had a lot of shakeups. I know they have Kyle Hamilton on the back end, but just a lot of shakeup and turnover. I think it's going to take a couple weeks for them, especially against Kansas City last week. I mean, Chris Jones took over, playing. I believe it was a rookie left tackle or right tackle. Excuse me, I can't remember which one it is. So
they played the Rosengarten kid from Washington at right tackle quite a bit.
Right tackle. So I mean, they started with the veteran, then they brought him in. First play he's in, he gets smoked. So
yep.
Just like I said, I can see the Ravens kind of getting there, but I just kind of tough. But we're going to finally get into the afternoon games. But before we do that, I know we talked about FanDuel earlier, but if you were playing over on DraftKings, once you deposit $50, you get $50 in bonus bets. IDPplus.com/DraftKings. So, like I said, make some bets today. Get the $50 in bonus bets. Put it on some anytime touchdowns, maybe some long shots. Get that money freed up so you can start gambling with us. So, IDPplus.com/DraftKings. 4 more games here. We'll try to get through these. I know we're running a little bit long here, close to the hour. We'll start getting some injury news here soon, but a fun one that we have to talk through is the Rams at the Cardinals. I think this game's going to have a lot of ownership, but I'm curious, obviously the numbers, but how you plan on playing this game today.
Yeah, Rams Cardinals is tied for the second highest over under of the week, 48 points. This game opened at Arizona by 1. It's come down to a pick 'em, so implied team totals of 24 on both sides. I think the big question is, Cooper Kupp is obviously underpriced because they played on Sunday night and the Puka injury happened while the pricing was coming out. So is he a must start? Do you absolutely have? I think in cash you absolutely have to start him, right?
Yeah. I mean, if you're not showing up to the party with Jordan Mason and Cooper Kupp, you're probably going to get buried if they do their thing. I think I'm going to fade Cooper Kupp in tournaments, but as far as cash games, I mean, you have to show up. 7,600 over on DraftKings. He ends up, being really cheap over on 7,700. I mean, that's a 9K wide receiver if they played their game at a different time. So,
and the fact that he's that much closer or that close to the DraftKings pricing at FanDuel says he's really underpriced on FanDuel.
Yep. So it says a lot. Kyren Williams is going to get a lot of ownership. I don't necessarily understand why. I get the volume. He's 8K over on FanDuel. We'll check DraftKings here for a second. But, I mean, the Rams are down, I believe, 4 offensive linemen? 3 guaranteed and waiting on 1 more. So, 6,800 over on DraftKings. I will not be playing Kyren Williams today. I'll let, everybody else play that game. The only other person I'm interested in on the Rams side is Colby Parkinson as a punt tight end, and I think he's viable on both sides. I believe he's 4,700 over on FanDuel, and then I'll check DraftKings real quick. But, I mean, I think he's going to be the second target behind Cooper Kupp as far as, this game goes for him. Probably going to be in a negative game script. Going up against the Cardinals offense, who I like today. So I'd like to hear, where you stand as far as the rest of the Rams go, and then the Cardinals side too.
Yeah, I think I like Kyren Williams more than you do just because of the matchup. Like Arizona's run defense is just really bad. I mean, they're as bad a run defense as Washington is a pass defense. So, and they got gashed by James Cook on week 1. So I do like him in that aspect. And I think because the Rams don't have Puka, I think they may want to try and slow it down a little bit. I think because, it's very high implied game total that Arizona is going to score. So I don't think they want to get into a shootout being a little shorthanded there. So I think Kyren Williams may get some run. And he is the unquestioned bell cow in that backfield, right? Blake Corum was inactive week 1. So he is the man there, only really competing with Ronnie Rivers for touches. So I love that floor volume. So I do like Kyren, I think more than you do. On the Cardinals side, I like Kyler a lot, and I like the Kyler McBride stack. If I'm going with a high-priced tight end this week, it's Trey McBride.
I definitely agree there with you. Just one thing on the Rams stuff. Like I said, you probably got to show up to the party with Cooper Cup and cash. My worry, I trust me, I know the Cardinals' defense is bad, but with Matthew Stafford, who I think he's fine, but was a little bit banged up, I'm just worried throughout the game. The water, starts loading up and the dam kind of breaks as far as that offensive line goes. Even though the Cardinals, they kind of got some pressure on Josh Allen last week. I know they don't do very well, and on paper, this probably sets up really well for the Rams. I'm worried that they're not able to hold up, especially going up against the Cardinals offense, who I think going to be really good all throughout the season. Like you said, McBride will probably be one of my most owned tight ends. I think he's in a great spot going up against the Rams defense, who's got a whole lot of nobodies. I mean, they got rid of Aaron Donald, just sent off their, basically their main guy, best linebacker to Tennessee. Yeah. I'm going to play the Cardinals side, and one guy I'm going to play a lot of is James Conner. Just the workload, especially at his price. He ends up a mid-tier running back, 6,400 over on DraftKings. I mean, he's in the Rashad White, Josh Jacobs realm. I'd rather play him than both of those guys. And then over on FanDuel, I mean, he's pretty dirt cheap too, 6,500. I mean, James Conner should probably be a 7,500 type running back. So I'm going to play a lot of him. That's probably going to be one of my stands this week. And I plan on pairing them with the Cardinals defense. That's pretty cheap. Just hoping that the Cardinals defense can get some sacks on Matt Stafford, hoping that the game just kind of falls apart. The one thing I will say, I saw a stat and I can't remember it off the top of my head. When Cooper Kupp gets more than, I think it's like 15 targets or whatever, that's usually, a sign for the Rams to lose. And we expect him to get that volume just because of no Puka, not a whole lot else going on. Just because Cooper Kupp might get there, I'm not sure if the rest of the Rams will as well. So I'm going to kind of lay off a little bit as far as the Rams side goes. But I mean, if you want to play Stafford, Kupp, and Colby Parkinson in large field stuff that's very concentrated, I don't think Matt Stafford's going to carry any ownership, and then you can bring it back with, like I said, Trey McBride. One last thing on this game. Any interest in Marvin Harrison Jr. after last week?
Not at his price point. I think his price point is just too high for what he did in week one. Maybe not.
Yeah, 6,500. That's a little pricey for.
Yeah, see, I would much rather play Neighbors at 64. I like Neighbors' matchup much better. I like Amari Cooper. I would rather play him. So yeah, I don't think I'm going to be getting much Marvin Harrison in my lineup this week.
Yeah, I think if you're playing large field stuff, I think that's a great tournament play. I think everybody's going to write him off.
It's a nice flyer, yeah, because he could go off, absolutely.
But just no, I don't blame you there. So next game, Steelers at the Broncos. I've got a running back here that I don't want to tout, but I feel like I need to. But I'll do that after you go over the game totals stuff. I just can't believe I've gotten here.
Yeah, grossest game of the week, 36.5 point total. Pittsburgh 2.5 point favorites over Denver. Implied totals of 19.5 and 17 for the Broncos.
So Justin Fields probably going to have a little bit of ownership. I didn't play him last week. I didn't think it was the right time, and I don't think it's the right time this week either. George Pickens ends up getting, Patrick Surtain, who, locked down DK Metcalf last week. I cannot believe I'm going to say this, but I think Najee Harris is in the nut matchup for the week, going up against the Broncos run defense that has just leaked oil going back to last season. Last week, Kenneth Walker ran all over him before he got injured. Jalen Warren seems like I think he's going to be active, but I think he's still kind of nursing that stuff. And, Arthur Smith didn't play him a whole lot. I know a lot of people were worried about Jalen Warren kind of eating into the touches there. I don't think he is. I'm going to be playing Najee Harris in tournaments. Oh my God, I can't believe I'm saying that. I've never been a Najee Harris guy. I've never played him just because I think he ends up, 2 touchdowns today. I think he could end up with 100 yards, one of those things. And, we saw what the Steelers did last week to Kirk Cousins. I mean, Seattle's defense, I know McDonald runs a really complicated scheme there, but I mean, they put Bo Nix in the blender. I mean, he didn't know what zip code he was in playing them, and he goes up against the Steelers defense. TJ Watt, Hayward, that whole gang there. Minka Fitzpatrick in the backfield. Joey Porter Jr. putting on the clamps, looked really good. I think this is a sweet spot for the Steelers defense too. It'll have a little bit of ownership, but I want to pair him with Najee this week, and really like Najee this week. I think he sets up really well.
I think this game is completely gross. This might be like a one touch. This might be a one touchdown game. I mean, Pittsburgh's playing back-to-back road games to start the season, and they've got to go to Denver in September, which is one of the toughest spots in the league, right? Denver in the heat, with the altitude and when it's warm, really tough place to play, and it's back-to-back road games. So yeah, I could play the Pittsburgh defense just because Bo Nix looks so bad, but I think they're gonna have some ownership, and I don't want to kind of fight that current. So I think I'm just staying away. I get the Najee thing because I think he will have volume, but man, I just don't know if there's gonna be enough touchdowns scored in this game to justify that. So I just want to stay away from everything in this game.
Yeah, I mean, got 20 attempts last week for 70 yards. That's, like I said, it's gross. Trust me, I want to take care of my people, and I appreciate everybody tuning in. Me, touting Najee is not something that I want to do, but I can't ignore
easily.
It pops off. So last game in the afternoon slate, and then we'll cover the night game for the FanDuel people. But Bengals at the Chiefs. This is a game notoriously been very close. Shows up a little different without T. Higgins, and then you're getting the Bengals off a bad start like they always do. They've done it for 4 years. Nobody should be shocked that they lost to the Patriots last week. But last game of the week, as far as the regular slate goes on DraftKings, what do you got here?
Yeah, tied with the Rams and Cardinals for the second highest over under the week. Cincinnati is a 6.5 point underdog at Kansas City. This game opened at 47.5 and 5.5, so it's been bet up to the Kansas City side and to the over. So 27.5 implied total for Kansas, or 27.25 implied total for Kansas City, 20.75 for the Bengals.
So this game's going to get a lot of ownership. I think if you're playing FanDuel cash this week, Patrick Mahomes is probably the quarterback you want to go do battle with. Rashee Rice is my favorite pass catcher. I'm probably not going to play Xavier Worthy just because I know he can get there. And I know that Cam Taylor-Britt kind of clapped at him during the week, so you get that narrative that, he might do something just, kind of shove it down their throat. But Rashee Rice just over the middle. Bengals defense outside Trey Hendrickson has been really goofy. Had most missed tackles ever in the Lou era, the defensive coordinator for the Bengals. Just really undisciplined football. I will play Patrick Mahomes in cash, and I don't think I'm going to play him in tournaments. Over the last year and a half, it just seems like he does not get there. There's some other guys I'd rather play on the slate. Travis Kelce, I don't think I'm going to play him either. I'm going to be underweight on this game, I think, even though a lot of people are going to play it. And then on the other side, I think the Bengals' funeral is a bit premature. We see, especially if T. Higgins is out, I will play the Joe Burrow stack with Jamar Chase. If the Bengals are going to have any shot in this game, it's going to have to be through Jamar Chase. And played him out of the slot a little bit last week. I think he's going to get a bunch of targets, much more than they did last week. Another week underneath their belt. And I know it's week 2, but this is a must-win game for the Bengals. I mean, going down 0-2, most teams don't get the playoffs, being buried like that. But I do think that Joe Burrow, I think he looked fine. I know a lot of people were worried about the wrist stuff because he carried a water bottle weird, but he looked fine last week. He's pushing the ball down just fine. But I'm going to be playing Jamar Chase. Like I said, these top-end wide receivers this week, CeeDee Lamb, Jamar Chase, we talked about Justin Jefferson with no Jordan Addison, very concentrated. And when they get so expensive, people are scared to click the button because it puts stress on the rest of your lineup. But, I mean, these guys are all in for, 30-point blow-up games. But that's where I'm probably going to go. I'll play a little bit Isaiah Pacheco. I'll get to him in a second. But, how are you attacking this game?
I love Isaiah Pacheco. He's my highest exposed player on the Battle Royale drafts. Cincinnati's run defense is terrible. They got run over by Ramondre Stevenson week 1. So, and I think this is Cincinnati's the one team that Kansas City kind of struggles with, especially defensively. So I think they'll kind of try and keep them off the field as much as they can. So I think this is going to be a really high Isaiah Pacheco, very, very concentrated Pacheco offense. So I love him this week. Really good price point, I think, on both DraftKings and FanDuel. So he's one of my favorite players. I like Kelsey, but I just think I'd rather have McBride. So if I'm going to a higher, if I'm going to a high price tight end, I would prefer McBride. I'll try to sneak in a little bit of Kelsey. The reason I like Pacheco so much is the reason I don't like Mahomes this week as a high price quarterback is I think this is going to be. I think Casey's going to try and slow this game down. I do like Chase a little bit as a contrarian play. It seems strange to think that he's a contrarian play, but like you said, we've got so many elite receivers, Lamb, St. Brown, Evans, that people are going to want, Jefferson, that people are going to want to pay up for. I don't know if people are going to want to pay up for Chase because of the Cincinnati's dead narrative. So I think he's a pretty good leverage on those other guys if you want to spend up.
Yeah, I mean, Jamar Chase is a 9K wide receiver. You're getting a couple 100 points discount salary wise at 8,700. So, like I said, or like you said, I think the Bengals are going to play too high. I know it's kind of a lazy take, but they're just going to have Patrick Mahomes kind of dink and dunk. That's why I think Rashee Rice is a great play. And then Isaiah Pacheco, that's where I want to go through this game. I completely agree. I'm not worried about Samaje Perine getting any work. I think it sets up really nicely for him, especially if the Bengals are going to miss tackles. I mean, that's one thing you can't do. They got rid of DJ Reader this past offseason. He goes to Detroit. He was the run guy. I mean, he was the glue that, held that in check. And now that he's gone, I think it sets up really nicely for Pacheco. I don't think this game gets into the crazy shootout narrative that a lot of people think with all the weapons, especially like Travis Kelce. I just don't think they need him to be that guy anymore. They bring in Rashee Rice, comes into his own. Worthy's there. They've got a really good run game, one of the better ones in the league. I just don't think that Kelce, like you said, if I'm going to pay up, I'd rather pay up for McBride. The only other thing I will say in tournaments, if you want to get a ton of leverage on this game, Zach Moss, I'm going to be playing a decent amount of him. Gets the 2-minute offense work, gets the goal line work. I think Chase Brown is not much of a part of the offense right now as people thought. I think people thought this was going to be more of a 50-50 time split, and it wasn't last week. I just think Chase Brown's got some stuff to improve. Maybe they scheme him up a little bit more, but as far as the important stuff, Zach Moss, I mean, he's a guy who can fall in the box twice, and he's going to be pretty cheap too. So that's really 6,300 over on FanDuel. I mean, that's pretty cheap for I think basically a workhorse back. I think I can say that with a little bit of confidence. And then 5,600 over on DraftKings. So, anything else on this game?
No, I like the Moss call as leverage. Yeah, I think that's a good idea.
So we've got that sums it up for the regular slate. Just real quick, if you're playing on FanDuel, can't forget about the Bears and the Texans. Kind of a goofy game, especially with how bad the Bears offense looked and how good the Texans looked last week. So how's that looking as far as the numbers go? I feel like this is going to be pretty lopsided.
Yeah, 45.5 total, coming down from 46.5, and Houston a 6.5 point favorite at home. That's up from the 6 point opening. So 19.5 implied total for the Bears, 26 for Houston. We are getting word that Rome Odunze may play after all. Sounded like he may have had a serious injury after week 1, but now it sounded like he might actually play. So I think that changes things a little bit on the Bears side.
Yeah, and I know Keenan Allen is questionable, but he's been questionable for like the last 5 years. So that's nothing changes too much. I think the Bears offense last week was so bad I cannot touch them until I see them do better. I mean, I know it's a rookie week 1, but I've had my suspicion about the Shane Waldron offense going back last year with Seattle, and I think a lot of that came to fruition here last week going up against the Titans, who I think they're a fine team, but I mean, I think Texans are a lot better. CJ Stroud, I would love to play the Nico and Tank Dell stack. I played that last week, and both those guys did really well, but Stephon Diggs got the touchdown, so it didn't pay off the way I wanted it to. But I think those guys are good calls. I love Nico Collins just in general. I think he's probably one of, if not the most underrated wide receivers in the game. Tank Dell's a guy who could break the slate, but I'm not sure if they're going to have to this week, just going up against the Bears if the offense is struggling as bad as it did.
Yeah, I think I agree with you. Bears defense is pretty good. Offense was just awful. And if you look at the Houston defense week one, it was basically 3 big plays, like we said when we were talking about Anthony Richardson, and that was really all they gave up. So yep. I think there'll be kind of a focus on that. So yeah, there's not much like we mentioned Odunze. I just don't think anybody's going to have him in their lineup. So I think he may be a leverage pivot just because. Again, I think he'll be so low owned because he was so questionable during the week. It didn't sound like he was going to play. So I think everybody who's got their lineups in during the week is just going to stay off of him. So as someone like a really low ownership tournament play, I kind of like. I don't like Joe Mixon in this game because Chicago's run defense is pretty good. Again, I think we need to look at Nico Collins as an alpha. He was the number 1 receiver. Like Diggs got the touchdowns, but Nico. So I'm not afraid to kind of go back to the Stroud Nico stack. But yeah, other than that, there's not much in this game that I want.
Yeah, I don't think Joe Mixon's going to get the 30 carries or whatever it was last week, just because the game was much more competitive with the Colts, and I mean they were gashing them. Bears defense is much better, but other than that. I feel like I should play the CJ Stroud stuff. I'm not sure if I'll get there. Kind of like last week, with Baker Mayfield. I touted it. Sounds good. And then I just don't pull the lever and kind of buries me. But I'm going to be open to that. And like I said, that's FanDuel only. I'll have to talk with support why they're adding the Sunday night game to the main slate.
I thought that was just a week 1 thing because of the Friday night game. But apparently it's going to be a regular thing. I don't know.
Well, they used to do it for 1 week, and 1 week's fine. We're all excited, but it's week 2, and I'm done. I don't need to do it. We got it out of the way.
I got to wait an extra 4 hours to find out if I won. That's unacceptable.
Yeah, I mean it's 11 o'clock before I find out how much money I've lost. I just
exactly
can't have it. But that's going to finish up the games real quick before we go. Let's get to some flag plants. Like I said, the one I about puked on. I'm just going to start with my first one. Najee Harris, I think it sets up really nicely for him. End up getting like 2 touchdowns. Get a lot of volume with Jaylen Warren kind of hurt and a good game script. So I'm going to go with him for my first one. What do you got going?
My first one's going to be Josh Jacobs. If you set the over-under at 29.5 touches, I'm going over. So I think he's getting 30 touches, just like Joe Mixon did last week. So I think you can expect a similar game from Jacobs as what Houston got from Mixon last week.
Yep. So I like that call a lot. I don't think nobody's going to play Josh Jacobs this week. And I mean, that's a volume play at a discounted price. And I mean, if he ends up in the box, I mean, it works out really well. Get a lot of leverage off the rest of the game if anybody's playing JT and Anthony Richardson too. So the only other one I've got, like I said, CD Lamb, I think he might end up getting a little bit steamed, but I don't think just because of his price point, being the highest wide receiver on the slate, I don't think a lot of people are going to click him just because the amount of stress. But I mean, this is an awesome matchup for him. Last week they played the Browns. Browns usually have a good defense, but I mean, Cowboys didn't have to get there, but he sets up really nicely against the Saints with no Marshawn Lattimore. So those are my 2. Did you have any other flag plants?
Yeah, Pacheco, especially on FanDuel where it's half PPR, and I usually want to put a running back in the flex. So yeah, Pacheco's would be my other one.
Yep. So I like that one a lot. And if you were playing on FanDuel, I think that's a great point that you made. You probably should be playing running backs in the flex, especially in cash. And then, tournaments is kind of if you've got like an alpha wide receiver. But if you were playing cash on FanDuel and you are not playing a running back in the flex, you are doing a disservice to not only yourself, but your entire family and preventing yourself from making money. So
Pacheco's also he's also in the late window. So, and there's only 3 late games. So if you wanted to be able to do a late swap, he's a nice guy to throw in your flex on FanDuel.
Yeah. Look at you go, Joel. Another great point. We get 2 games, the Bengals and the Chiefs and the Rams and the Cardinals, where you can late swap, kind of some hammers out of there and kind of say if you're behind, you can get to some of those guys, get them at less ownership if you're behind today. So that wraps it up. This has been awesome. Before we go, let the whole world know where to find you and what you got going.
Yeah, at the JoelWirth on Twitter. Like I said, the Battle Royale, Underdog Battle Royale show comes out every week. It's going to start coming out Wednesdays on the regular, and be here with you every Sunday doing DFS.
There we go. So I'm at Jameson Rules on the Twitter machine. Rider Dynasty podcast with Joe Harlow and JJ Wenner every single week. And then here on Sundays, DFS. If you guys need anything, just holler. We've got Discord over at IDP Plus too, and I hang out there too. So if you have any lineup questions, feel free to reach out to me. I'm available. I'm here trying to help you make some money. So, Joel, it's been a blast. Looking forward to doing this some more. And
100%.
Like I said, if you guys check out everything at IDP Plus, a lot of great stuff going on. Bets, IDP, obviously, for you degenerates. I don't know how you do it, but God bless you. But other than that, hope you guys win some money, and we will see you all next week. See you guys.
Thank you for watching the IDP Plus YouTube network. If you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Be sure to tap the bell icon to get notified whenever we upload new content.